We're looking at this book today, Taken by the Muse by Ann Wheeler. Oh, got some more people coming in. Perfect. We'll probably start in earnest, a couple minutes after 3 or so, as people are able to come into the room. But thank you all for joining us. It's a bit of an experiment today, just seeing if how we can leverage this sort of digital space for the sorts of things we'd like to do in person. And the Alberta Reads, contest thing seemed like a good idea to try and mix with book clubs, which I know a lot of people are missing. Can't have them in person, but we'll try this. See if we like it. Oh, Earl, you sent in some questions. I'll say, Earl, these are mostly for Anne, who is not going to be present, but if you want, I can ask her. She emails me all the time. I could probably find out some of these for you, or we could kind of use them as a springboard for discussion of what we thought about those stories in the book. But yeah, I've never worked with Donald Sutherland, but he seems cool. I'd like to. All right, so yeah, let's go a little bit longer. Those of you in the chat right now, were you able to find the book easily? We're actually on our third printing now, but it was kind of intermittent there. It's a little bit difficult this year with some of the COVID restrictions. Oh, Alexander's here. Hello, Alexander. Like I was saying, with the COVID restrictions, it's difficult to ship things now. It's difficult to print them, and it's difficult to sell them. So really, this is a good time to be using your library, especially the ebook collection that BPAA has put together. But yeah, for those of you in here now, how did you read it? Did you get a chance to get the print version or what? Found out about the book just a couple days ago, so I picked up the ebook. Oh, cool. Did you read it already, Earl, or are you just still working on it? Read a couple days ago. Good. It's a pretty quick read. She's got a very engaging voice, and like it moves along at a good clip. So yeah, I quite like this book. I mean, I published it, but I still like it. And don't worry, we'll be able to, once we actually start, you'll be able to kind of raise your hand, and we can do some audio chat too, so everyone can have their say on what they think about different parts of the book. But yeah, I think it'd be a nice little afternoon thing. I'm gonna try and aim for about an hour or so. So if you want to stick around for the giveaway, that'll be right at the end, so we know who's all attended. Anyone else in the crowd also read the book? Jock, it sounds like you read it pretty deeply. You've got some good questions here. Okay, well, I've got my cocktail here. This is the Beneath It All. Wendy says, haven't read it yet, but I am interested in the discussion. We'll probably get the ebook. Oh, Anne's here too, and Brian Hades, nice. Everyone's streaming in now. Yes, this is the Beneath It All, which my partner Aaron developed for the Alberta Reads competition this year. And if you're interested in making one yourself, I'll tell you how to do it. I'm from Red Deer. Yes, Reddit and saw a short film on the last story. Is that? Oh yeah, that's the one with Augusta. Yeah, that's quite the story. And I think a lot of her movies are available for free on NFB, so they're pretty easy to get a hold of. If you've got the NFB app on your Apple TV or your Amazon Fire Stick or whatever, you can get a hold of them pretty easily. All right, got some more people here. Clara, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Sylvia, welcome. So like I said, I've got a cocktail here, the Beneath It All, developed by my partner. And if you're interested in making one yourself, it's 2 ounces rye whiskey. We like to use Hanson Red Cask. It's a nice Edmonton company. Yeah, they're Edmonton. Yeah. So Edmonton Company. You also need sweet vermouth. So unfortunately not made in Alberta, but some Kochi sweet vermouth. We've got Ironworks raspberry liqueur. It's from Calgary. And the Prairie Rose bitters, also from Calgary. And if you're into the zero proof cocktail, the Devil and the Divine, that's mostly stuff you got at home. Red Deer East Winter cocktail, hot chocolate and mini marshmallows. Oh, that's a classic no matter where you live. That's good stuff. It's really nice out today here in Edmonton though. So I took a nice walk before this, thought about what I thought about the book. So now we can all chat about it. You know, as a publisher, I've found that video calls actually take care of one of the big problems we were having with launches, which is accessibility. A lot of the bookstores in the country are not particularly accessible to people with disabilities. I believe Glass Bookshop here in Edmonton is probably the only one that's fully accessible in every single way, and that's because it's in a mall where it has to be. So like the bathrooms are, you know, equipped for people in wheelchairs and stuff. But for a lot of smaller, older bookstores where the books are crammed in and you can't even walk around. Remember those? I miss those. We'll get there. We'll get back there eventually. But those sort of places were not super accessible for people with disabilities. But the nice thing about a video call is that everyone can appreciate it. So I think once this is all over, we're probably going to keep video chat, video launches as part of our arsenal, because it fixes a problem that we couldn't really figure out before. But now that everyone knows how to use the software and stuff, I think it's a great idea. But enough about that. We're here to talk about Ann Wheeler's Taken by the Muse, put out October by New West Press, where I work. My name is Matt Bowes. I'm the general manager of New West Press. I worked there for 8 years, and I've been the general manager for about 5 now. So I worked on about 100 titles for New West, getting close to there. But yeah, I quite like this one. Anne calls it more of a creative nonfiction than a sort of documentary nonfiction, because this goes almost 50 years or so back. It's not like she would have been able to remember the conversations, but she remembered the people participating in them and the situations that were happening. So we're not calling it like straight nonfiction. This is her artistic interpretation of what was going on. But yeah, the book is available in bookstores and online, and definitely through the Read Alberta eBooks collection at your local library if you're in Alberta, which I think probably all of you are. So if you haven't read it yet, I suggest go pick it up there or go buy a copy. It's a great Christmas present for people who are Canadian film fans in your life. So I recommend it. But enough about that. Let's talk about the book. So I'm just going to go with a few of our questions here and kind of work around that to start a discussion going. So Jock McKenzie sent in a question saying, could our moderator describe the process Anne followed in getting her book published? I'll kind of give a short version of this because I know a lot of you people here are already in the publishing industry and are fairly familiar with how it worked. But as I understand it, Anne had kind of journals that went back to these periods and referred to those while working on her manuscript. She approached a substantive editor before submitting the book to New West. So they worked out most of the kinks that way. And then they sent it to us and it was in great shape. So we read it, we evaluated it, and we put it on the docket. And Eva Radford was the editor on this book. She worked closely with Anne to keep, you know, things like the voice and time period, just make sure there's no anachronisms, that kind of thing. And then we put it out. I honestly can't say anything about this year in particular being typical because everything was different this year. Where does one find a substantive editor? Oh, you could check with the, what do they call it? The Editors Guild. I think it's editors.ca. There's kind of people hanging out their shingle there who are looking for new clients and can help you work with it. One of them that I know is Kimmy Beach in Red Deer. She can look at a manuscript and kind of polish it up. So yeah, that's the sort of person you look for. check out the Editors Association, and there's plenty of different kinds of editors there for all kinds of different manuscripts. Okay, Isabel, who I don't believe is here, but sent in some good questions, said, what is your favorite behind the scenes moment in the book? Oh, good. Patricia put the link up to editors.ca. So if you're looking for an editor, that's a good place to find one. And I think there's a few editors actually present here today. So if you want to, make yourself available, names are there. Isabel, yeah. So your favorite behind the scenes moment in the book. So I think mine, I really liked Beneath It All, the story about up in the oil sands and almost freezing. I thought that was the kind of story you don't really hear about because it's like a corporate gig. She's not doing this one because she felt any need to talk about how this parcel of land was going to get touched by oil sands development. She got hired to do it. And as a working filmmaker, you just have to take whatever gig came across your desk. But I think definitely this sort of, hair-raising experience probably led her to want to do her own work from now on and work on her own topics. So I think that was my favorite behind the scenes moment. Hands up, anyone got a behind the scenes moment from the book they want to share? No? Okay, then. It's fine by me. I also quite liked Anne's got one. Okay, here, Anne, I'll let you talk. Okay, go ahead.
Her flying adventure when she was hanging out the side of the plane. That's early on in the book, taking extraordinary photographs of the ground. I thought that was memorable.
that would probably be, the last time I ever went near an airplane. But, she went and did it again and did all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, that's some crazy bravery to do that, especially considering they're kind of jury rigging that whole setup for her. It's not like they had a real harness. So, yeah, that was a good one. Any other behind the scenes bits from the book that people liked and want to talk about? No? All right then. Well, if that's the case, I think we'll go to the next question I got here. I'm going to try and disable talking on Anne so you're not on the screen anymore. Yeah, okay. So, Anne, next time you want to talk, we'll just do that again. Seemed to work pretty well, though. Okay, so Wendy, this is more of a publishing question, but I can actually answer this one if you want. How has or will the COVID-19 pandemic change the publishing industry in this country? It would be difficult to think of a way that is not, that the pandemic has not changed publishing in this country. Oh yeah, right. Just got reminded here, this is being recorded. So that's why we didn't go with the typical Zoom meeting type thing where we're all of our faces, because you don't necessarily know if you want to be in a YouTube video down the line. So that's kind of why we're doing that. And there's also, if you don't want to speak up using your voice, you can also chat like a few people have if you've got a part that you want to do. I got enough talking for all of us, so don't worry about that. By the way, Jock says, my bride and I have kids near Telquest, so they understand the off-the-grid experience. Yeah, I'm a city boy, so all that stuff kind of terrified me a little bit. I grew up in Fort Saskatchewan, moved out into Edmonton 17 and never looked back. Yeah, the pandemic. I mean, basically any part of the publishing experience has been made more difficult by the pandemic. Printing, distribution, bookstores, these are all restricted in various ways. And sales, I mean, they fell off a cliff in April. Any of the publishers here can tell you that. But there have been some good things like the general acceptance of video chat and the kind of buy Canadian, buy local, buy Albertan attitude. I've liked that. I think we've seen an uptick in sales in that sense because, people realize that big companies are going to be there no matter what. Amazon isn't going away as much as I'd like them to. So you might as well order from Glass Bookshop and Audrey's and Shelf Life and Owl's Nest, all these places. Keep them going and save the convenience of these big online retailers for later. Here's the next question. So Earl's questions are, again, sort of centered on what Anne, directed towards Anne, but I can kind of meld them into just more of a discussion point. So in his first question, he talks about tape technology and limitations compared to film. She talks about that a little bit in this. I think one of the things about the book that reads very differently to a modern audience would be the difficulty of getting cameras and film, because it seems so, it seems so commonplace to us right now. You just whip out your phone and take a video or something, or load up what do they call those? The little SD cards full of screen. But really in the 70s, especially for Downside Up, Anne has to order a camera to be sent by plane, basically, to the airport, where she picks it up and then drives it over. So just logistically, I think things were so much more difficult back then that it must be a real relief these days. I mean, you do lose the sort of texture of film, but there's also ways around that. Any thoughts on the actual filmmaking in the book from the audience? Anyone want to chime in on how they thought the book portrayed filmmaking? No? Oh, Earl, sure. Go ahead, Earl. You have to unmute yourself, but there we go. Earl? Can't hear you there, bud. You might want to use the text box. I can't hear you. Meanwhile, Jock says, Taken by the Muse would be a real hit with seniors. Any chance of it being printed in large print? Unfortunately, no. We are a pretty small publishing house. We only do 10 books a year, and large print would kind of be out of our price range. I don't think we've ever done one, but one thing that if someone has sight issues, access to the ebook version would be what I would suggest, because you can change the size and the different fonts. You can use the dyslexic font if you need to, that kind of thing. And if you're a blind person, you can use a Daisy reader to do that. So yeah, that's what we would suggest for people with sight issues, would be to go with the ebook version. Earl, you got the mic set up fixed, or? No? Sorry, tech glitch on my end. Okay, well, I just wanted to say, this is Earl, just wanted to say I appreciate the sections of the book where she talked about the difficulty of being a woman filmmaker in a boys' club and fighting for opportunities. Yeah, she's, well, when you talk to her, she has a real sort of holistic attitude towards that. She told me that she considers all men her brothers, and she grew up with a bunch of brothers. So she was kind of primed for a, unfortunately, fairly masculine dominated industry at the time, and still probably is. But she was able to kind of use the way that she grew up and her family as a way to understand how to make men do stuff, basically, how to talk to us and how to, I don't want to say manipulate, but that's sort of way that, a woman can kind of interact and get what she wants. So yeah, I appreciated that a lot too. Okay, Earl, I'm gonna disable talking on you, maybe see if you can fix it on your end. Any other thoughts on the filmmaking aspects of the book? Oh, Anne's got one. Go ahead, Anne. You're muted. There we go.
Okay. Oh, just going back to the accessibility issue, is there any chance this could be made into an audiobook? I think it would work quite well as an audiobook.
Yeah, it probably would work quite well. We've talked to the author about it, and I think she would be keen. The problem is on our end that recording custom audio is very expensive. So, and again, small press, we don't have that much money. But one thing that has helped us in the our audiobook selection as it stands so far is that the CNIB actually will record a custom audiobook for patrons who need one. And through a partnership with the BPAA, we've actually been able to purchase these and use them. So that's been kind of revolutionary. The CNIB ones are recorded by volunteers, and it's real kind of devotion to your craft. A lot of them are voice actors and things, or it's just people who like reading and want to help out. So that might be our audiobook solution at some point, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Okay, disable Anne. Jock says, did Anne offer other stories and let you choose the ones in the book? I think the whole package came together as it is. I don't believe there were any other stories added. I wasn't an early reader on this, but I don't remember hearing that she'd added any other things. I know she's working on a follow-up, so she may have kind of late 80s, early 90s stuff when she's kind of fully matured into her filmmaking, because this is on the path to becoming a filmmaker, as you can see. And she really wanted to make it clear that this is kind of steps on her way towards filmmaking and early films, but she didn't really consider herself a fully fledged filmmaker at this point. I'm just gonna take a little sip here. Did anyone out there try making the drinks? The Nimbu Pani, the lemonade one, is especially delicious. I mean, it's more of a summer drink, but adding a little bit of salt to lemonade really makes it tasty. Well, I got another question from Jock here. So Jock says, how important did other attendees find the chapter titles? Were any of them spoilers? I didn't find any of them spoilers. I think they're fun. Had I known the Devil and Divine meant the sort of sobriquet she was given at the ashram, that might have been a spoiler, but it kind of reads as just an interesting phrase when you're just looking at the table of contents. Did anyone else have any thoughts about the chapter titles? Spoiler, downside up. Yeah, that's also kind of just a little pun. Alexander will be having a cocktail after work. Attaboy. Jock also asks, or two, nice. Jock also asks, what can readers do to promote books like these and increase your sales so you should become a big publisher? Oh, well, that is a great question, Jock. Tell everyone you know about this book. As much as I don't like Amazon, leaving reviews on there can help. The algorithm kind of notices how many you add and then will promote it more. Although their algorithm is kind of screwed up right now. So during the pandemic, it is difficult to work with any sort of algorithmic agency like that. And Amazon is also super backed up on orders and things. So it's really the things I could recommend to you don't make sense right now, but in the future, yeah, reviews, telling all your friends, ordering, asking your library to order it in if they don't have a print version. All the Alberta ones should have the ebook version, but a print version, if you ask your library, they'll order it in too. You also mentioned Goodreads. Goodreads is actually owned by Amazon and is part of that whole infrastructure. We actually quit using it, but I can't, probably doesn't hurt. Peter knows all about Goodreads. We had an issue with that. Wendy, this is a question. Okay, well, we could talk about this one. So Wendy asks, what are the differences and similarities between screenwriting and writing for the page? Sounds like maybe Earl would know a bit about this, or possibly Alexander. Any thoughts on screenwriting versus prose writing? No? Okay. Earl's wondering about Library Thing. Library Thing is popular among librarians and some research types, but it never really caught on with general audiences the way Goodreads did, which is why Amazon bought Goodreads. They didn't buy Library Thing. Is there a non-Amazon alternative? For book sales, yes, alllitup.ca. That is the retail arm of our distribution company, Lit Disco. So any New West book or a lot of LPG books or indie books across the country you can find there. There's also a new site called bookshop.org, which you can buy the book online, but they give a cut of the profits to indie bookstores who sign up with them. So you get the convenience of ordering online, but also you're supporting indie bookstores. So that's a great alternative. Okay. So Alexander says, the thinking process is pretty similar, but the technical process is very different. For screenwriting, you are describing what the reader can see or hear and avoiding any internal thoughts of characters. Earl says, I feel like screenwriting is in some ways a little bit more complex and you have to take logistics and budgets into account. Yeah, you can write about whatever you want. You don't have to, figure out how much the CGI would cost for that. Okay. Here's another one from Earl. It's an interesting question. So this is to Anne, but her experiences in Kenya and India began with distrust and possibly even fear. And they transform into positive exchanges. What did you all think of that? He's talking specifically about south of Mombasa, where her car breaks down and some local people show up and she's a little bit scared because it's the middle of the night in 1971. It's not like she could call anybody and she doesn't know who these people are, but they bring her to their village and they help her out. And she kind of uses her techniques from theater to tell her story of what happened to her without using, their language, which is interesting. And in The Devil and the Divine, she joins that kind of ashram, and it would be kind of a nerve-wracking experience. And I think it kind of does get to her at some point because she ends up leaving. And I think the sort of communal nature of where they're living and sleeping, I think that does kind of wear on her. Any thoughts on the Kenya and India parts of the book? Jock says her storytelling skills in Mombasa served her well. Yeah, they did. It's nice to know that if you can, spin a good tale, you can kind of get along wherever you are. People just like to get entertained, Anne says that they're really engaging, exciting, incredible. I agree. So here's another question from Jock. Did readers find it easy to see what was happening in each chapter? If so, would this be attributable to Ms. Wheeler's career in film? Is there a gap between filmmaker and author? I don't know. I don't know if I noticed any sort of different way that she was writing to depict landscapes or people. Earl, sorry. I think I missed you, Earl. Did you figure out your mic situation? He says, good question. I found it quite easy to visualize what was happening to her. I think I may have, yes. Okay, do you want to chime in now then? Yeah, raise your hand, I'll let you in. All right, Earl, go ahead. Nope. Still no go. Okay. Well, yeah, sorry, I can't help you. Don't know what the issue is. Will anyone in text want to talk about just the way that, no worries, probably a browser issue on my end. Yeah, I find that using the downloaded app works better than in the browser. I think it gets updated more. So yeah, filmic language in the book. I think she does a good job of describing the mechanical act of filmmaking and that kind of thing. But I don't know, I don't know if I really noticed any sort of filmic language being used in her descriptions. But this may be the way that she works in film too. Oh, Jock's raised his hand, let's try. Jock, give yourself an unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can hear me now, I guess.
Yes, I can.
I thought that you could see the things, but She basically just told you as opposed to let you imagine. Because I would think as a filmmaker, you need to make sure that your audience sees what's going on. I just finished reading a book called Rabbitfoot Bill that's set in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And that particular author, Helen Humphreys, used a considerable number of similes, some personification so you could hear what was going on and things like that. So I think there was a difference.
Yeah, she's very kind of in her first person narration most of the book, apart from The Woman Who Didn't Exist, which I think is probably the best story, unless anyone else has any ideas on that one. I think that is my favorite one. Oh, maybe Earl's got it working. Let's let Earl back in. Carol, one more time. Oh, Brian's here too. Earl? No, I don't think it's working. Sorry, bud. Okay, Brian, any thoughts on this? You have to unmute yourself though. Here, I'll unmute you. Brian? Okay, don't know if it's gonna work for Brian either. Here, I'll disable for now. Yeah, it's kind of a cliche that you would think a person from a visual medium would try and relate that in prose, but I don't know, maybe she was just trying to get away from that. Maybe she had been writing in that style in all of her screenplays and things and wanted to go with the more standard literary style. I can ask her next time I talk to her. Wendy, are virtual events going to be part of a regular part of book promotion going forward? I kind of answered this one already, but yeah, I think they are. Now that everyone has the software on their end to at least participate and see regardless of where they are, I think they are. I think once we all get vaccinated, we'll probably not use video chats for a while. We'll probably have been sick of them by then and want to lay off and meet each other in person, but I could see us filtering back into that. Well, I think I'm going to move to the questions we wrote, the general discussion questions we wrote for the book. These are, if you go all the way up to the top of the chat, Patricia's put them there, so you can follow along there if you want, or I'll just say them out loud. So the first one we got here is, as Wheeler would go on to become a celebrated feature filmmaker, what did you think of the book's events taking place before her greatest artistic successes without really mentioning them? Were you aware of her films before reading the book? Oh, and Patricia's put the link back there, so it's right at the bottom of the chat now. I knew a little bit about Anne Wheeler as kind of a important Canadian film person. My partner is a film studies major and had told me a little bit about her work, but I hadn't really seen any. And then once we accepted the book, I watched a few of them to try and get into the zone. And I quite like her work. I haven't seen the sort of big 90s ones, Your Bye Bye Blues, etc. I haven't really had the time for those, but I would like to at some point. Anyone else want to chime in on how they knew Wheeler going in? Anne.
Hello, Anne Wheeler got an honorary degree from Athabasca University about 20 years ago, and I introduced her, so I felt I should see as many films as possible, which I did, and I just love her films. I think they're really wonderful. Bye Bye Blues, I saw for the second time in a plane, like video, it's great. We could actually see a Canadian film on a plane, and I was just blubbing the whole time. And the one she did about her father in a concentration camp is just so amazing, really, to recreate that horrific story and make it very powerful and very positive. It was just a memory. It was sort of a memorial to her father. Really amazing.
Yeah, she put a picture on her Facebook the other day of the plaque outside the camp and just remembering. I think it was for Remembrance Day, actually. So, yeah, that's quite the story.
Yeah, and her short ones that are all, as you mentioned, are accessible through whatever it is, the Canadian
the NFB site. Yeah,
B site.
They're all right there
too. I mean, she was doing this way before it was thought of about stories of Indigenous women.
Yeah.
And Loyalties is another story of an Indigenous woman in northern Alberta. Again, I think it was 10-2 Cardinal is in that one. I mean, like, she was doing this stuff before anybody else, basically, doing wonderful stories of the province and the people in the country.
Yeah. Earl says, I remember a couple of her early shorts from grade school, Augusta and Great Grandmother. Then my mother raved about Bye Bye Blues in the late 80s. To date, I've only seen an assortment of her shorts, now the features. A war story is really good. That's the one about her dad, I think. Jock, go ahead.
I was impressed when I had the e-version of the book from the local library, or the Parkland Regional Library, because I don't live in the city of Red Deer. But when I looked at the cover, and I was just trying to get to look at the back cover, and I can't get there fast enough, I liked the fact that we didn't get inundated with her awards, her Orders of Canada, and this and that and the other thing. And basically, I think, look at the book and say, hey, interesting title, interesting cover, and then you go from there. I'm a little depressed. I think that some people get something published, I don't know if it's Amazon or what it is, they can be a bestseller for an hour, and then they get to put on the front of their book, bestseller. And it's all smoke and mirrors.
Well, this one was an Edmonton bestseller, I think 1 week, so that's something. But with Amazon, a lot of people like to game that system. So if you bought 50 copies of your own book, you could be a bestseller too. So yeah, I don't have a lot of great things to say about Amazon. They're not going to like this video. But yeah, with that way, I think she wanted us to just really focus on the material of the stories rather than her backstory. We put all that on the author page. But yeah, we didn't say from Ann Wheeler OC, for instance. I think she wanted to just kind of, this is her debut book. So, in a sense, it's her starting from square one on this thing, this particular artistic endeavor. But the blurb from Alice Walker, author of The Color Purple, I think is kind of an indicator of people that she knows, and it's kind of her set, So that we thought that was an indicator. Yeah.
Hey, great. How does that happen?
They just know each other.
Huh.
Yeah. It's all the people you know, man. Cool. Thanks, Jock. Okay, I'm going to move to the second question now. And we will be doing the draw for the $50 gift card soon, too. So keep that in mind. Don't leave right away. In the introduction to the book, Wheeler is contacted late at night by another Canadian artist. Were you surprised by this interaction? What do you think novelists and filmmakers have to learn from each other? So yeah, I think it is interesting that she drops that kind of bombshell right at the beginning. It's, oh yeah, by the way, I know Margaret Lawrence. Margaret Lawrence called me in the middle of the night when I was working on The Diviners, I guess. I think that's the movie. So yeah, I kind of saw that as a bit of a handing of the torch. One sort of generation going to the other one, and moving into prose as apart from film. It's kind of felt like that sort of linkage that way. Oh, Jock. There we go. Go ahead, Jock.
I was surprised pleasantly by that connection. I was saddened a little bit when I thought, well, maybe she's just kind of tidying up before she sheds that mortal coil. But I wonder how many authors are really kind of aware of the fact how important it is to help one another.
I think a lot of them engage in mentorship and doing like writer in residence gigs, for instance. It seems like you meet a lot of people early in their career there, and you can kind of show them maybe not how to work, but how to get your work out there. Because it's difficult to teach someone to write, but I think you can kind of inculcate someone into how to get something published and the journals to go to, the magazines and publishers down the line for a collected book. So that's the sort of thing that you don't really learn in an MFA, but you kind of learn on the streets, as it were. You kind of learn it as you go. And an author can kind of show you how to do that if they can take the time to mentor you and stuff. So yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions on the Margaret Lawrence bit? Any other thoughts on that? Okay. Okay, so next question is, Ann Wheeler's book is written as a work of creative nonfiction. So I talked about this earlier, where creative writing techniques are used to make the reading experience more compelling and vivid, rather than as strictly autobiography. What does this distinction mean for you in terms of the stories contained in the book and Wheeler's own recollections of events? Which pieces or scenes stuck out to you for their vividness? So yeah, when you talk about creative nonfiction, it could be kind of streamlining a story to make it more palatable to a reader. Like if you had to talk to 3 people to get an item, you could just distill it down to 1 so that the reader isn't getting bored while they're reading the story. And I thought this was especially apparent in, which one was that? Beneath It All, because when she's fallen off the snowmobile into the ice, I don't know how much of what was going on she would even be able to notice, because like she was frozen. So she would have had to kind of talk to everyone afterwards and just imagine what was going on outside of her as this whole event was happening. So that was a point at which, yeah, she couldn't really literally be remembering all this stuff, but she can remember what was happening to her and then kind of piece together what was going on outside. Any thoughts on the creative nonfiction debate? Because it is a debate. People do like arguing about this with regards to Ann Wheeler. Jock says, it's kind of like watching a movie you've taped. You could skip through the commercials. I think it was Lil Abner who said, too much is more than enough. Yeah, your everyday life is typically not that exciting, and a documentary rendition of such is not really worth it most of the time. But if you can distill it down to the meat of it, then you're cooking. Any other thoughts on this one? Well, in terms of seeing, oh, Wendy says, in terms of creative nonfiction or nonfiction or fiction for that matter, what is truth, and what is fiction? Great idea. It's all being filtered through the author's imagination. So unless it's a tape recorded bit, it's always going to have the artistic touch on it. One thing I bet the thing that was probably the closest would be The Woman Who Didn't Exist, because it's not Anne telling that story. It's what was her name? Her name was Doris Ward. So yeah, this is the story about the sort of settler woman coming to Alberta in the turn of the century. And she was promised a house and a lot of land, and she got those, but she got a lot of stuff that she wasn't prepared for. And no one should really have to deal with abusive husband and living in the middle of nowhere. I think that one is probably going to be based on a recording, because she was recording this. And that one, she probably, when you're telling someone else's story, you probably want to do it as accurately to what you're known as possible, as opposed to elaborating. Earl says, I felt like some of her experience in the ashram must have been slightly stylized or compressed to clearly express her soul searching at that point in her life. The scene of humiliation in particular almost felt a little on the nose for real life. This is not to express doubt on my part, just that the real experience probably wasn't as thematically perfect as the recreated experience. Oh, this might be where your the screenwriting background comes in, kind of build it to a nice climax, possibly. Yeah, any other thoughts on creative nonfiction? It is honestly a minefield. People argue about this all the time. No? Okay. Well, next up, while most of the stories in the book take place in Alberta, south of Mombasa and The Devil and Divine take place in Tanzania and Kenya, respectively. How are these settings depicted, and were you able to imagine yourself in these locations? Is it a more challenging task to imagine a different time and place? We talked a little bit about this. Oh, Alexander says, I'm a fan of creative nonfiction. Yeah, me too, actually. We talked a little bit about this with Earl's question, but I think it probably does do a pretty good job of depicting a young woman in sort of an environment she's not comfortable with, and maybe sort of like a hyper real version, because she's worried and a little bit of anxiety. It's not exactly going to be that documentary style again, but I think it put me in the mind of those places typically, and it didn't really, I haven't been there, so I can't attest to the realism, and I definitely wasn't there in the 70s, but it read true to me. I don't know. What about you guys? Any thoughts on that one? Guess not. That's fine. Oh, did Anne's editor pare her stories down? I think she did a little bit, yeah. It's a slimmer book, so I think she probably took out some of those incidental characters, that kind of thing, that weren't close to the main narrative. Okay, in Downside Up, Wheeler finds herself in a perilous situation while filming in an airplane. Would you have been able to finish the job like she did? And what lesson did Wheeler take away from this situation? I can 100% say that I probably couldn't have done that. I don't think I've ever been in an airplane with the door open. It's not something that comes up that often when you fly commercial. And if it does, it's not good. I've never really been in a bush plane up to, northern Alberta or something, but I would like to ride in a helicopter someday. I've never done that before. But do any of you have experience with small aircraft? Raise your hand, don't be shy. Jock says, heights, crazy pilot? No way. Yeah. Yeah, he's got a pretty funny introduction. And then the women in town are just like, oh yeah, don't worry about him. He's gonna kind of mess with you, but he's a good egg. Anne says the original manuscript wasn't very long, just the right length. Yeah, Anne's a member of New West Press Board, so I believe she was one of the readers on it. I think Wheeler probably learned a valuable lesson about how to load that particular camera and which direction to point it. But that's just a great kind of end cap to that story. Jock says, I've flown into backcountry lodges with good pilots. Very cool. I think maybe I was in a Cessna one time. I was probably pretty little. Okay, so this is my favorite story in the book, I think. The Woman Who Didn't Exist is a harrowing portrayal of what life for some immigrant settler women was like in Western Canada in the early part of the 20th century. Are immigration stories a part of your family history? And what extra responsibilities may exist in telling the story of another person, especially a story that would have remained unheard if not told? It sounded like, yeah, this woman heard about Anne Wheeler on the radio and thought, well, this might be my only opportunity to get this story out there. So she got in touch with her. And this was in mid 70s, right? So yeah, 1973. There weren't a lot of amazing ways for an older woman in an old folks home to really get their story out there. No social media, that kind of thing. So she kind of latched onto that opportunity and thought, okay, I can get this young woman to tell my story. But there is a responsibility with that. You want to portray it accurately and you don't want to sugarcoat it. You definitely couldn't sugarcoat this story, but I think you want to portray the main character per se, Doris, as who she was rather than some sort of idealized Tess of the D'Urbervilles type who's only experiencing difficulty after difficulty. She's a real person, and she had different sorts of reactions to what happened to her, but it's not idealized. Any thoughts on depicting real people who aren't you in your creative nonfiction? I'll take a sip, don't worry. You got plenty of time. Oh, Anne. Go ahead, Anne.
Very challenging, I would think, to do that, because you're speaking on behalf of somebody else, basically. So, yeah.
You're also introducing their story to the rest of time, right? Because if they die and no one hears about it, it might as well have not existed, as the title of the book said. But if you write it down well enough, it will enter into the annals of history, essentially, and your version will become the definitive version of that story, at least until, if it's a famous person, someone else could do their biography. But if it's not someone in the public eye, you're probably going to be defining that person for the rest of the time. Wendy says, especially if you're writing about family who are living in your creative nonfiction, if you, the writer, remember a story and the other person, yeah, I can imagine writing about your family in the creative nonfiction sense could be quite nerve-wracking. We've had some authors get waivers signed by people they've done in creative nonfiction. It's not like they were doing a particularly denigrating look at this person, but it was just to cover their bases. Family tension, yeah, definitely. Thanks, Anne. So, Sheet on the Wall shows us a great relationship that developed between Wheeler and Augusta Evans, an Indigenous woman living in rural British Columbia. What can this artistic partnership tell us about Indigenous settler relations in the 1970s? And what does it tell us about the modern day? Oh, Peter. Peter says, real people is very difficult, whether you know them or not. In some ways, writing about family or friends is harder. What Wendy said. Memory, says the South African poet, Mongani Sarate is a, well, I probably can't say that one, but if we want to keep this chat family friendly, but you can a mother effer, you can check that out in the chat. He's writing about rap people. He's a poet. Okay, good. Or she, he, Mongani Sarate, he. Okay. Oh, we had a question earlier on that Patricia brought to my attention. So Jock asks, can you think of any New West books that have the same story told from different points of view? Yeah, I can actually. There is it's soon to be a series. Anne's familiar with this one. Karen Hoffman's What is Going to Happen Next? And coming up next year, A Brief View from the Coastal Suite. It's about 5 children who were separated when they were young by social services because their father wasn't taking very good care of them. So they grew up in vastly different circumstances, and that has some great scenes where you're seeing different perspectives. They're all family, but it's their different takes on events that they're seeing, like a child's birthday party, that kind of thing. So Karen did a good job on that. But about the Indigenous settler relations in the 70s, to me, it sounded like 2 nations who settlers had, wronged Indigenous people about as much as you could, really. And it was very heartening to see Augusta willing to take Anne into her confidence and then be delighted that her story was going to be passed on through the medium of film. I like that a lot. But it seemed like that was sort of like first steps. And nowadays, I think we are beyond first steps and we need to do better than just, meeting and talking. You have to kind of do more listening. Any thoughts on this? No? It is a very tricky question. Anne says Karen Hoffman's novels are highly recommended reading. I agree. Yeah, writing about Indigenous issues, if you're not an Indigenous person, is just about the most difficult thing I think you can do in Canadian letters right now. My question is, what does the artistic partnership between Wheeler and Augusta Evans tell us about Indigenous settler relations in the 70s and the modern day? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of respect that you have to earn, essentially. You can't go in and talk about things from the white person's perspective and expect it to be taken as the truth, the gospel truth. It has to come from a position of working together. Yeah, it is the most difficult question facing Canadian letters right now. So I'm not expecting you guys to figure that out for me. Next question. Wheeler talks about, Earl says, in that story, I loved Augusta's sense of wonder when she saw herself in the film. Touching moment. Yeah, especially considering in the 1970s, there were not as many commercially available cameras and projectors and things as they are today. I could see kids these days, you take their picture. This happened with our nieces and nephews before. You take their picture and they immediately want to see your phone just to see the picture of themselves. But someone in the 70s would have to wait for, a week or two to even get something back from the print getting struck. So that sort of immediacy we have nowadays would be an incredible luxury if it was at all possible then. So I think, yeah, being able to see yourself on a screen would be actually way more rare than it is now. Yeah, so Wheeler talks about growing up in the 1950s and 60s in the Canadian West as being a time to be a kid, a great time to be a kid, lots of freedom and little parental supervision. Would you agree with her assessment? Is there bravery in Wheeler's travels and adventures that may not be possible without these freedoms? Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. She talked a lot about how she could kind of ride off on her horse on the weekend and tell her mother, "Yep, we'll be back on Monday." It's definitely a sort of freedom that I think is pretty rare these days because people are so much more connected all the time with phones and the like. But I think there's a fair amount of privilege there too. Not everyone was able to take off on their horse. A lot of people would have to stay at work, even kids. So it would be a great time to be a kid if, you know, if you're a white person with some means, but not everyone had a great time. But I do think that there is a fair amount of bravery in her adventures. I mean, she, in the Mombasa one, she did go all the way around the world and basically lived a whole lifetime of adventure before this started. She, you know, worked as a teacher, then almost married a guy on an archaeological dig in Egypt, and then ran away from that. And yeah, she had quite the adventures. I do think that social mobility might have been a bit more easier back then. You can't exactly fund an around the world trip on a teacher's salary these days. You can't take off for a year. That was a special time when you were able to do that that before inflation and the like. Any thoughts on the sort of globe-trotting nature of the book? The way that Anne was able to live a whole lifetime of adventure before turning like 35, really. Jock. Go ahead, Jock.
This is the first time I've been involved in this particular book club, and I'm wondering, A, how often are they? And B, how often do the authors, if ever, join in the fray?
I can answer that. This is the first one ever. So this is actually connected to the book being chosen for Alberta Reads Book Club. So this is either the second or third book. Can you refresh my memory, Patricia? I think it's the second one. So third, okay, it's the third one. So this is a pretty brand new project that BPAA, so for those of you who don't know, the Book Publishers Association of Alberta, has put together with the province and booksellers and libraries. So it's a way to kind of celebrate Alberta published books by Albertan authors. And yeah, this is a test case to see if this format works, if we need to change it so that everyone's visible next time. Do we record? What sort of, do we make it a regular Zoom meeting or a webinar? How do we do this? So, you know, leave your comments in the chat if you have any ideas, because you know, we're just giving it an honest try. Oh, Kieran says our plan is to choose a new title every 2 months, so 6 titles a year. And Anne says it would be great to have the author participate. With Anne Wheeler in particular, she's done gotta be 5 or 6 Zooms by now. And I think she's feeling a little burnt out on them at the moment, but she may be back in the swing of things after holidays. But yeah, she's done a lot of them with libraries actually, especially on the West Coast. But you hear that, Kieran and Patricia and Danielle? Sounds like next one of these you do, they want the author to do and not me. So there you go. Thanks, Jock. Especially with COVID, this would be a terrific idea, even after COVID. Yeah, I mean, there has been no end of author events on Zoom, but with the kind of book club aspect to it, that might be a different sort of level of interest to it, because typically at a author event, you can't anticipate the people having read your book, whereas with the book club, you're hoping that they have. Kieran says that they generate a short list based on publisher submissions and choose the titles from that. So that's how they pick the books for the club. And is it alternating nonfiction and fiction? I think it was, right? think so. I don't have confirmation on that. We're going to look at other genres as well. Yeah, one of the earlier ones was a graphic novel put out by Renegades. So I think actually a sort of demonstration of the art techniques might be good for a graphic novel next time. Alexander, that one's for free. You could potentially have a drawing thing and see them sketch out a scene or panels or that kind of thing. I think people really like seeing other people draw. It's one of the big things on Twitch right now is watching drawing. So that is my recommendation to you. Alexander says they do production process virtual sessions with creators. There you go. So if you're interested in how comics get made, talk to Alexander. Check out Renegade on Facebook and you'll see their new events coming up there if you want to see how that particular art form is produced. Oh, we are very close to the end of time. Okay, what do you say? One more question, then giveaway, or do you want to do giveaway first? First person to say it in the chat, they will decide. All right, let's do the giveaway. Danielle, can we see that board? Oh, there's a question in the Q&A too. Okay, I'll answer that Q&A question after the giveaway draw. So let's see the board. Okay, so here's everyone present now, and we are drawing a $50 gift card to the independent bookstore of your choice. So I think what you'll do is get in touch with the BPAA, or they'll get in touch with you and they'll figure out which store you want to buy books from. So, okay, let's do it. Let's click that wheel. Well, that's exciting. Earl J. Woods. All right, Earl, you did it. So I think the BPAA will get in touch with you. Is that right, Patricia? Yes, okay, yeah. So Patricia will get in touch with you for your gift card. I got one more question here. I think that's probably good for today. So this is from Sylvia Woodhurst. How does someone in the UK access this book? Well, we do have distribution in the United Kingdom. It does just take a little while to get there. So in a little while, I won't check right now, but our distributor is called Gazelle. And I think what would happen is you could either buy it straight from them, Gazelle Book Distribution UK, you could buy the book straight from them there, or stores in the UK can order it through Gazelle. So if you have a local store you like, you can ask them. But yes, the print version will take a while. It normally takes a while. And with COVID restrictions on top of that, it takes even more time. So please be patient with that. But if you want an ebook version, you should just be able to buy it wherever you buy ebooks. So that would be the quickest way to do it if you want to read it right away. Okay. Well, I think that's everything. I like this last question now. Can you give me 5 more minutes? I like this last question. Okay, I'm gonna do it. So, as Wheeler is a filmmaker, these stories have a sense of adventure that would not be out of place on the silver screen. Who would you cast as Anne Wheeler in a film version of this book? And which piece or pieces would you most interest you to see as a movie and why? So as young Anne Wheeler, I have met her, and we do have her picture in the book a couple times. So I don't know who I choose. I probably should have thought of this ahead of time. If I was going to make this movie today, oh, do you know who I'd pick? Elizabeth Moss. Do you know her from Mad Men? The Invisible Man and all those movies, Queen of Earth, Her Smell, great movie. I would pick Elizabeth Moss to play Anne Wheeler. That'd be my choice, but I'm open to suggestions. Hands up if you got them. Anne. Go ahead, Anne.
Oh, I can't remember her name, but the actress who played the chess heroine.
Anya Taylor-Joy from the, yeah, she's a good choice too. She's got the hair, and yeah, she has just an incredibly unique face. Look up Anya Taylor-Joy after this. She's a great actress. And Earl J. Wood says that, oh yeah, Elizabeth Moss in The Handmaid's Tale. I forgot about that. Very good choice. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I would pick. For a modern day Ann Wheeler, maybe Glenn Close. Thank you, Ann. Any other thoughts on this one, or shall we say goodbye? That sounds like goodbye. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming out to the inaugural Alberta Reads Book Club video discussion. Jock says thanks. Thank you, Jock. Yeah, you know, we're open to suggestions on how to do this next time. I think that worked pretty well. I think it's better than a kind of crazy scrum of people talking over each other, but you know, maybe leave a note in the chat to see if there's anything you would change. But thanks for all for coming. I had a good time. Now I'm done work, so I'm just gonna go not do work anymore. But thanks again. Thanks to the BPAA, Patricia, Danielle, Kieran for putting this on and running all the technical aspects for me. And thanks to Anne for writing the book. And yeah, stay indoors. Now is the time for indoor things, like watching movies or reading books, which are my favorites. So do those. And yeah, we'll see you at the next one. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Clara. All right, well, we'll see you later.